Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Thea Montanez. I proudly sit on the board of Hartford Public Library, and welcome to tonight's author talk with Kara Sundlun and her new book, Finding Dad. So before we get into tonight's conversation, I'd like to play a clip to kind of set up tonight's conversation. So.
The first official father-daughter appearance for Governor Sundlun and Kara. He seemed paternal, protective.
This way.
I don't think there should be anything. It just needs a slight ease.
Meeting the media, there was already an easiness, a humor.
I imagine that I'll get more than the usual number of Father's Day cards this year.
Kara acknowledging she'd heard his reputation for being cold and arrogant.
Well, everyone told me basically those same things, but I also actually yesterday he was described to me, excuse me, as a milk toast, as somebody who was hard on the outside but underneath was soft. So.
When asked if he sees any family resemblance, the governor was quick to point out he only has 3 sons.
None of them bear much relation to this beautiful
Trying to say
small
I'm
young
short?
woman standing there.
Kara's 5 feet 2 inches, but she wasn't intimidated by the sometimes intimidating governor. Listen to this response about religion.
Do you know I'm Jewish?
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand the Jewish religion probably as well, as he does. I've gone to as many bar and bat mitzvahs as anybody else.
Maybe better.
Probably better.
But both acknowledge there's still a lot of work to be done in the father-daughter relationship.
And you can't wave a wand and have miracles happen. That happens in fairy books, but not in real life.
It took a while, but I think things will happen for the best.
Kara spent last night at Sundlun's Newport home. She'll be spending a good part of the summer there, getting to know her dad better. Today, as they left their first and only press conference on the settlement, he again grabbed her hand, determined now that he's accepted her to build a good relationship.
Great, so now I'd like to introduce Kara Sundlun. She is a 2-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, and you can catch her live every weekday as the co-host of Better Connecticut with Scott Haney at 3 p.m. on Channel 3. And she also anchors Eyewitness News at noon. She joined Channel 3 in 2000 and has covered several of Connecticut's biggest news events. She's reported live from Ground Zero after 9/11, and she's also traveled with local National Guard troops to Bosnia and Germany to cover the war on terror. She was the only Connecticut reporter to travel to Washington, D.C. to report with exclusive interviews with local lawmakers as the Iraq War began. She's been named in 2006 Best Local TV News Reporter by Hartford Magazine and was one of Hartford Business Journal's top 40 under 40. She grew up in a suburb of Detroit, but has many ties to New England with family in Rhode Island, as you just saw. And she currently lives in Hartford with her husband and Eyewitness News anchor Dennis House and their 2 beautiful children, Helena and Julian. Please welcome Kara to the stage.
Thank you, Thea, friend and moderator tonight, also a resident of Hartford. Thank you all for coming out on this cold, cold night. Isn't it nice to be inside your wonderful, warm library? Aren't libraries awesome? Especially the Hartford Public Library, if you don't get a chance to come here very often. I've been surprised about all the great things they have, so take a moment to poke around after you're done. They have a lot of resources here. So I love that we set it up with the story. How many of you actually remember reading about my story way back when? You do, a couple of you. So I had no idea that it was going to become a national/international story when I decided to go find my biological father. But let me tell you a little bit about why I decided to write Finding Dad. It's a question I get often. Why would you write about this 20 years later when back in the day it was everywhere? It was in the New York Times, People magazine, even Oprah was calling. What could you possibly say today? And my answer is, back then I was just a young girl who didn't really know how the ending was going to be. I just knew I was following my voice. my inner voice to go find something in me that was missing, which was the presence of a father. And in researching this book, I've learned that Sigmund Freud actually says there is no greater need in childhood than the protection of a father. And that's something that, I was lacking. My mom was always honest with me. She always told me that your biological father is a man named Bruce Sundlun. But I didn't really know what that meant, and there were times in my life where I was young enough to go, I don't know what a biological father is, but I don't think I want one. That sounds a lot different than my friends. And their dads come home after work and have dinner, and they're not called a biological father. So I felt disconnected and different, and there was a time where I just let that be, and I didn't really talk a lot about who or where my dad was, because it was this abstract thing. I woke up one night, which is how I start the book. I woke up in the middle of the night in 1988 when I was 13 years old, and I'd never even seen a picture of my father. And I woke up at the very second that a CNN news anchor was announcing the election results. And they went to Rhode Island and said, businessman, war hero, tycoon Bruce Sundlun almost beats incumbent governor Edward Dupree. And they showed the graphic with his picture, and it said he had gotten 49% of the vote. And it couldn't even compute that it meant that he almost became the governor. I was more like, oh my God, is that him? And that's exactly what I did. I reached over to my mom, and I shook her because I was sleeping next to her. We happened to be in a hotel room because we were in the middle of a move. And I'm like, Mom, is that him? Wake up. And my mom said, oh my gosh, he must have gone back to Rhode Island where he's from. Because the last time she saw him was 1977, when I was 2, and she was settling a paternity suit with him in Columbus, Ohio. She was his chief flight attendant. He was a CEO of Executive Jet Aviation, which was a private airline for the rich and famous. Today it's called NetJets, and it's owned by Warren Buffett. So my dad was the former war hero pilot turned businessman who now got into the business of aviation, and my mother worked for him. And they dated on and off for 5 years, and then there was me. But when I came along, there was nothing but turbulence from my mother. My father chose not to accept me. There was no DNA back then. She decided to have me, which I'm grateful for, and I also say that she's really brave to have done that in the 1970s. It wasn't so easy for women to have babies alone. She was 31 years old, so she wasn't a complete kid, but she was alone, and she didn't have the support of her family. Her mother thought she shouldn't have a baby alone, and there were many people in her life that thought she should do something to maybe correct the situation and move on. And she decided not to do that and have me. And ultimately, she tried to get my father to acknowledge me, but because there was no DNA test, and he had big-time lawyers and all of that, she ultimately decided to settle out of court, and she took $35,000 from my life and signed a paper that she promised to never call him again or let me use his surname. But that doesn't quell the need of a child to know their father. Today, that's not even legal. We can thank Isaiah Thomas for that. Isaiah Thomas, a case of his, went to court, and you'll read that in my book, that ultimately now says it's illegal to pay a lump sum for a child. You must actually arrange for a child support settlement that goes over the course of a lifetime for a child. And I think that's a good thing because kids need a lot more than money. And as Dr. Stephen Perry said, many of you know him from Hartford, I interviewed him for the case of fatherlessness right here in our community. And he had a good quote saying, there can be no divorce rate from your kids. There's many different reasons that fathers and maybe sometimes mothers choose to vacate their children's lives. But it's gotten to a point now where fatherlessness is an epidemic in America. And even our fatherless president has a White House task force on curing the ills of fatherlessness. And we have staggering numbers. In some communities, it's as many as 43% of children living in a house without a dad. I'm not necessarily the face you think of when you think of fatherlessness. Often we think of someone from my minority community living in an inner city, but that's actually wrong. It's an issue that knows no boundary of race, of socioeconomic, of community. It happens everywhere. My father was a rich white guy and decided he didn't want to be a dad. And he had 3 children of his own. So it's not always the case that it's just someone who doesn't want children. In my case, it was inconvenient for my father By the time he found out about me, he'd remarried for the third time. And I think he didn't want to acknowledge that he possibly could be the father of a baby that would have had to change his life, perhaps upset his new marriage, get in the way of his career, all those things. And that was very painful for my mom, and ultimately looking back, it was why a part of me was broken, because dads provide stability. They provide a platform for your core, and they provide all these things that you're not even aware of. I didn't even know a lot of this was missing until as I grew up, I started to realize that maybe I was always seeking approval, or I didn't quite always feel as strong as I wanted to in the world. And even though my mom was a devoted single mom, she was only half the recipe. And it's ultimately why, when I saw him on TV, I thought, oh my gosh, I need to find him. And I think that was my inner voice looking for the missing part of me, looking for that protection that Freud told us about. I dreamed him, I mean, of course, my father also, it didn't hurt that he was everything you'd want to dream up. He looked like he could be a force in my life. He looked like he could offer me stability and protection and all those things that children want from a father, if I could just find him, right? So what you'll see in Finding Dad is it wasn't easy. As I reached out to my father, ultimately with letters, he didn't answer. I ended up getting an attorney. That attorney also wrote letters, and that didn't necessarily get us too far. One day, I was frustrated, and after school, I decided to call the Rhode Island State House. And I dialed 155-1212, and I asked for the number of the Rhode Island State House. And I even pressed the extra one. I knew my mom would be mad at me for paying the extra 50 cents to get connected back in those days. But this is pre-Google, so how else are you going to get a number? It's why I'd never seen a picture of my dad, because there was no Google. And someone answered, and I said, this is Kara Hughes. I need to be connected to Governor Sundlun. It's a personal matter. He'll know what it's involving. And to my surprise, I actually got transferred to a woman named Patty Goldstein, who was my father's executive assistant, who answered the phone in a very almost maternal, sugary voice. And Patty's a good friend today, so I mean this with the most respect, but she was very calming, disarming, and she knew all about me, and she knew all about my letters, and the governor really does want to meet you. It's just been a difficult time. This is October. He's running for re-election for his second term. I'm not really aware of this. I just want to meet him. And I say something from deep inside that sometimes the universe just gives you what you need to say. In this case, it wasn't entirely true. I said, well, okay, but I'm coming to Rhode Island anyway, because I'm going to go look at colleges, and I'm going to go be staying at Brown University, and I'm planning on coming out there in a couple weeks. And if I'm going to be there anyway, I'd like to meet him. And that got her attention, and there was a long pause. Okay. And then I got a call from the attorney within 2 days later saying my father had agreed to meet me, and he would do a DNA test, and he'd even pay for my flight ticket out. Now, when I said that, I had no plans to go see Brown. I didn't know what I was going to do if they said yes, but I thought I'll figure out a way to get a ticket if he says he's going to meet me, and I'll just go. And that was this place just acting probably from desperation of this need to meet my father. From their end, they probably were worried about an October surprise, and I was too young to know what that was. And I was really intent on not hurting my father, and which is why we acted in secret, which is why I didn't go file a lawsuit off the bat, all that. I just wanted to meet him. But ultimately, as you read in the secret meeting in chapter 5, that was sort of the fork in the road of my life, because my father agreed to meet me. They had me flown into Boston, Logan Airport, because they ultimately didn't want me coming into Rhode Island in case it got out. And an aide picked me up and drove me to meet him at his condo in Providence, and we had 4 hours to talk about our lives. And interestingly enough, genetics is a strong thing, because as I raced around my apartment in West Bloomfield, Michigan, and my mom's telling me, you know, you have to wear your hair curly. He has curly hair. And I blow my hair straight. And I'm like, I'm wearing it straight. That's it. And I did anyway. She's like, but your hair's curly like his. You got that from him. Wear it curly. And we're having this mundane argument about how I'm going to wear my hair when I'm going to go meet the man who helped make my hair. And it was a very odd feeling, like, what should I wear to meet my maker? So I decided on something more like college interview. And I went out there with all these hopes, and I didn't know what to expect, but I grabbed my baby book. And I thought, well, at least I'll show him that. I'll show him my baby book. It has clippings of my hair, my awards. Mom has saved all this stuff. It was kind of like a marketing package. And that's really how I felt in the beginning. My first letter I wrote to him, I said, I'm 5'3", I've got blonde hair, I'm on the National Honor Society, I think you'd be very proud of me. I was selling myself as to, I wanted to be worthy for his acceptance. And I realize that that's a pattern now that I research, that fatherlessness actually sets on. So many kids are out there trying to be better than they are, don't feel that they're worthy enough. They're missing that part of them that shows acceptance. It shows that they're actually just fine the way they are. Interestingly enough, I show up, and what does my dad have? A bunch of photo albums. And we spent 4 hours basically showing each other photo albums of our life. And my father showing me when he was a kid, he was a fast runner. And ultimately, he would have gone to the Olympics had he not gone to World War II. There was no Olympics that year, obviously, because he was a fast runner. But then ultimately, he was shot down in Nazi territory and had to hide in the dirt. And his whole crew was either killed or captured, and he was the only one to make it out. And he had to hide in the underground. Nobody knew if he was alive or dead. And he was like a real-life Daddy Warbucks or the general from The Sound of Music. He was tough. His shoulder blades were pinched together. He spoke with a commanding presence. But underneath that all, there was this softness that I was connecting to. There was an unmistakable connection, even though he was still coming from a place of fear. I didn't know what he was going to do. I just knew in this moment, in these 4 hours we had together, we actually liked each other. And that was a pretty big thing for someone who's 72 and 17. I wasn't sure what we were really going to say to each other in a room by ourselves with popcorn and juice for 4 hours. Yet we didn't talk about why I was really there. And toward the end of the meeting, I thought, well, I think I have to ask this question. I can't go home and tell my mom and my friends. I don't know. I never asked him anything. So I said, in the end, you'll read in the chapter, I said, well, do I look like anyone on your side of the family? And my mother has always told me that you look just like your father, you act just like your father, and I would get mad when she say that. And if you look at the book cover, you might think that we do look a little bit alike. I see that now. Although, interestingly enough, I wasn't sure then. I looked at him and I thought, I don't know, he's got brown eyes, I've got green, he's tall, I'm short. Okay, he has wavy hair, but who knows, you know? And I couldn't see the striking resemblance that the New York Times would later report on. I see it more now. I can look at pictures and my brothers and later now that I have this family. But at that moment, I wasn't sure. And what he said to me after I asked that question, do I look like anyone on your side of the family? He said, no, but they've asked me to take a blood test. And I'll take a blood test, and we'll see what happens. And beyond that, it's been nice to meet you anyway. And it was a very rehearsed answer, and it's like I felt him jump back into his place of fear and defensiveness. And I realized, okay, this is going to be a longer road than I planned for. And the reason why is because there's only two things in the universe, I believe, love and fear. And I was coming from a place of unconditional love. I believe children are often wired that way. It was why I was willing to accept and forgive him for all the mistakes he'd made. And he was coming from a place of fear, of all that he might lose if his life changed with a daughter that no one knew about. But the moral in Finding Dad, as you'll read, is it is universal law that love beats fear. And it is the way it was meant to be. But I say just because it was meant to be doesn't mean it was meant to be easy. Ultimately, the story got out because 6 weeks before I turned 18, my attorney told me if you don't file a paternity suit, you're going to lose any rights you have. And I said, well, I've spent the last couple of years trying to be nice. But I believe that he should at least help pay for my college education and acknowledge me in some way. Now that we have a DNA test, it says I am his daughter. And if he's not going to do that, then at least, if he's not going to have a relationship with me, then at least he should have to take some financial and legal responsibility. So I guess I've got nothing to lose. I'll go ahead and file it. Well, ultimately, that was another meant-to-be moment, although I didn't know that all that difficulty was going to lead to the happy ending I was seeking. What happened was the story went berserk. My dad actually beat the press to the punch. He came out, held his own news conference, said it's highly likely, in the language of a blood test, highly likely means 98.6%, that's DNA, the best that science had back in 1993, that I have a daughter. I don't have any legal responsibility because she was adopted by another man. Now, that didn't go over well. I was adopted by another man. My mother got married when I was 3. They were married from the time I was 3 to age 10. But you'll read in Picket Fence and Imposters that wasn't really a good relationship. He was an alcoholic. He had a drinking problem. I wasn't that close to him. He adopted me because it seemed like the right thing to do when they got married. But when they ultimately got divorced, he disappeared and we never saw him again. And so for me, the need to find my biological father, I think, was even greater because there wasn't this father figure, stepfather. People say, well, what about the man who loved you and raised you? And it just wasn't there in my life. That was my mom for me. And thankfully, my mom was supportive of me trying to find my real father because she thought it was something that I would need. She just knew that someday I was going to need to go find my father. She never had a doubt, which is why she was always honest with me. So when the news story broke, I had no idea that all of a sudden cameras would follow me around and stand outside my house and do the things that I have to do to people nowadays. And as a news reporter today, I'm very sensitive when we have to go stake out someone's house because I know what it's like. And hard copy and inside edition and, even, like I said, even Oprah was calling. And everyone wanted to know about what we were going to do because here was this relationship playing out on TV. And my dad shocked the world. I think that the media coverage was a birth announcement that he needed for the world because he no longer had the fear of telling people. It was out there. So what he did, no longer in that part of fear, was, as you saw in the piece, decided he's going to accept me. My dad was a pretty decisive guy. Once he made a decision, he would go full force. And it took him a while to get there, but once he did it, he said, listen, I'm going to help pay for your college education. Anything else, I'm going to treat you like the rest of my children. But I want you to come live with me. How else am I going to get to know you? So I'm 17 years old, about to go to college. He runs a state. He's got a point. He can't just hang out on weekends. If I'm going to really get to know him, I'm going to probably have to go live with him. So I knew right then that despite all of the heartache and all of the mistakes, I was going to leave everything I knew and pack my bags and leave my apartment in suburban Detroit and go and live with my father. And I did. And instead I moved into as you saw, his estate on the Cliff Walk in Newport. It was an environment I wasn't quite used to. All of a sudden I was a governor's daughter when I had just left a minute ago from being the daughter of a single mom. And all of those exterior things that go with that were very overwhelming and exciting. But it was really the small moments that did the healing. It wasn't the fact that my dad had a beautiful home and that he had means and all of those things. It was nice, and it was interesting to move in. I felt a little like Annie. But it was after the long day where we would sit on the couch and eat Oreos together and realize that we both loved chocolate, or that we went to a restaurant and we'd order the exact same dessert or the exact same food, or that we had some similar expressions, that we started to heal in moments. And I knew that I could not spend the next 18 years beating him up for the first 18 years. If I spent all that time asking him, why wasn't he at my Christmas? Why did he not accept me into his life? Why did he not become my father as he should have? Why was it so hard to even meet him or get a DNA test? Why did he do the things that he did to my mother? Those were all valid questions, and it didn't mean that I condoned the behavior. But forgiveness is about letting go. It's not about condoning the other person. So I knew that if I wanted the happy ending, I would really have to let that go, because we'd have to weed it out to grow something new. And that's ultimately what we did. And we formed an incredible, close, loving, healing relationship. And the reason I wrote the book some 20 years later is because I learned that fairy tales aren't real, but forgiveness is magic. And ultimately, you'll read, I don't want to spoil anything at the end of the book, but I got to know my father 1 year longer than I did not know him. I actually helped him cross over. He died in my arms with my whole new family surrounding him. We've spent holidays together. We've healed because my parents are now Gigi and Poppy and not just warring foes from the 70s. I can think of when I was at St. Francis Hospital giving birth to my first child, Helena, and here I am in labor, and I was more worried about what is going on in that waiting room. Dennis, will you go check? Like, really? My mom and my dad and my stepmom are all in the same room for however many hours this is going to take? It's not going very fast. And they learned how to have a new relationship. And my mom went on her own journey of forgiveness, which I got to say was probably more difficult for her than it was for me. As much as she wanted me to have that relationship with my father, she was an adult who was deeply hurt by him and who did all the hard work and then handed him a gift-wrapped daughter. And here he was loving having a daughter in his life, and people are saying he's becoming a better guy, and I'm enjoying this, and we're going on vacations together and spending holidays together, and I've got 3 new brothers that thankfully opened me with open arms and an open heart, and today are wonderful uncles to my children. But my mom went through that period of feeling excluded and feeling like, well, where do I fit in? She lost her exclusivity of being the single mom who did all the hard work to now she's got to share me. So as much as she wanted that, in theory, I think there was a journey for her to get to that point. And people say, did your dad ever say he was sorry? And the answer is kind of. And I say that because when you go on a journey of forgiveness and transformation, you're not always going to get the pound of flesh that maybe you thought you were looking for, of some big maudlin apology and long, and I'm so sorry, and I should have done A, B, or C. I got something better. We healed completely because we did it in moments, and my dad would just show up in my life and showed me, rather than tell me, how sorry he was. And he did that by being there for the birth of my children, by coming to Parents' Weekend when I went into college, by being there for my first job, by being there to make sure that I ended up with a good guy, and Dennis having to ask my father for my hand in marriage, and the 2 of them having that relationship. And at my wedding, as he's standing up talking about all the things he's proud of, I have this Emmy Award-winning journalist for a daughter, and Dennis is this, and I'm sort of cringing, thinking, oh no, let me look at Mom. He's saying all these nice things, and I know what she's thinking. And he ultimately maybe read her mind, but did something that was great for our family and for her. And it was moments like this that made the difference, where he said, and I can't take credit for any of that. All of that credit goes to her mother, who raised her alone. But I'm so happy that she's in my life, and I'm so happy that we have this family. And my father always had Thanksgiving. That was his holiday, where some 50 people would come, and that was the Sundlun family Thanksgiving was something you never miss. And from the beginning of when I started getting invited, it was a special time for me. Well, today, now that my father has passed, the Sundlun family Thanksgiving, believe it or not, is actually at my house in Hartford. And some 26 people who flooded my house this year were people I would have never even known if we hadn't taken that journey to forgiveness. So I think there's a lot of universal lessons in there. I think whether you're searching for something to heal in your life, like a father, in a literal sense, like I was, or you're just searching for how to mend a broken relationship, or even how to find your inner voice, you're going to find a lot of that in finding Dad. So with that, I'm going to open it up to Thea, who I know has some questions. And if we want, I can read a little bit from the book, but we'll kind of take, I've been finding a lot of people have their questions. So should we sit? What do you want?
Let's have a seat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just ask, sometimes I've had people come who've already had the book and have read it. How many are here who've actually read it already? That's okay. We have them here, but I didn't know if anyone had actually already read it. You have? First chapter. The Awakening. Okay, you got through the first chapter. You like it so far? Good, okay. And Thea has read the book.
I did. So I devoured this book within one night. And so I highly, highly recommend tonight that you leave with a copy of your own. But, you know, to your point about lessons, there are so many lessons I learned, not only about forgiveness, but also about making assumptions. So I can tell you, I'll never forget, we were both at a charity event. And I remember, like, we were chatting, and all of a sudden, you know, Kara's like, oh, I wrote this book, you know, Finding Dad. And it's like about me, you know, finding my father. And I'm like, what do you mean finding your father, right? So just kind of assuming that, you know, someone like Kara didn't have to deal with issues around fatherlessness, right? And so I think you kind of touched upon it about these misperceptions that these issues only exist, let's say, in urban communities, right? But this is really an issue that exists, throughout the country. And so for me, it really challenged my thinking, and again, the assumptions made, right, about, what does fatherlessness look like? And so with that being said, I'm curious, growing up in suburbia in Detroit, were you, growing up in a house with a single mom, were you aware that you, lived in a household where you were being raised by a single mom? Were there other kids, right, that had that similar experience? Did you feel different growing up?
I felt different growing up, probably because of the kind of community that I grew up in, where my two best friends that you'll read about in the book, Brooke and Dana, had, I like to watch the Brady Bunch after school, or the Waltons, and they came from families like that. So I always felt a little envious in times where maybe their dad came home from work and was picking them up and hugging them, and how was your day? And both of their moms kind of stayed home for the most part. Maybe they had a little bit of extracurricular work. They weren't working as hard as my mom was to keep me in a good school system and to provide for all that. So I kind of felt like a little defective. And I think that part of it may be that I felt a little deprived compared to my friends, that they had fathers and that their mothers weren't as stressed out having to balance everything, and that they had that family, that nuclear family that I seemed to want. And the other part being that that's actually a psychological thing that happens in fatherlessness, I've learned from researching, is that there is a feeling of being less than. It's the textbook. I mean, when I didn't know until I started writing the book, I'm like, oh, so I had textbook symptoms. I mean, it's actually, without having the presence of a father in your life, it's a textbook symptom for people to feel less than, regardless of their financial circumstances. As I said in many newspaper articles, people would say, oh, what about the money? Because my father was wealthy. And I said, well, I'm not destitute, but he's my father and he should do the right thing. My mom worked hard. We weren't living on food stamps. She had a business. She was an interior designer. Some months were great, some months were not. We were not, I certainly, but I wasn't living in some, stricken poverty where some people have that idea that, people are without a dad, must be in this bad community where they've got no options. I mean, there's plenty of kids who maybe they even know their father, unlike me who didn't know him, but their dad is just on business absentia for years and left and doesn't really come anymore, says they're coming and doesn't show up. And that is showing that child that they are not valued. And there could be a whole bunch of reasons where dads don't show up. And some of it's that they don't feel like they're needed in the kid's life, or that their mother has made it so difficult that they don't come around. Unfortunately, the research shows the number one indicator whether a father will stay is the relationship with the mother. In my case, my dad worked pretty hard to never be there. But regardless whether your father is a businessman or whatever, the symptoms, I guess, are the same on a human being. So to answer your question around, yes, I felt like I was always kind of smiling, and everyone thought, okay, good, I did well. I was on the debate team, and I did honors courses, and I looked the part, and it looked like everything was where it needed to be. But inside, I felt a shakiness, a defectiveness, not quite, and that's from, I think, not having the foundation of a father.
Yeah. So I think it's ironic that you felt those feelings. And so when I think about you, and I think about, number one, you being brave to confront your father. Number two, being brave to share your story, right? Which is really, emotional, and it's raw, and it's being vulnerable, right? And then I think about your professional career and the fact that you went to Bosnia and you reported 9/11. And did you swim with sharks when you won that Emmy?
I did.
You did. So you swam with sharks.
I swam with sharks. And I actually did a dumb thing in that in order to get sharks, you know what you do to get sharks to come to your boat? You have to chum the boat, right? So we caught the shark with a fishing reel. I didn't reel it in, someone else did, to show what kind of sharks are in New England. It was the summer of all the shark attacks. So we wanted to show how many people have actually been attacked in New England. Don't worry, it's not many, but we do have sharks. We caught the shark, and then we realized, oh my goodness gracious, we forgot to do the underwater stuff. I'm like, oh, so I'm gonna get in the water now that we've already chummed it? And I did. And I got in the water, and my photographer, Eric Budney, who was an underwater shooter, I'm like, if you see a shark coming anywhere near us, because we just reported that they can smell the blood a mile away, we wave or something so I can get back to the boat.
But yes, so I did. I didn't actually touch the shark. Thank goodness we caught the shark first, and another one didn't come while I was in the water. But I had to see the shark and then get in the water.
So it's interesting to me, right? You talk about feeling kind of, defective and a little shaky, but yet and still you're swimming with sharks, right? And you're confronting the governor of Rhode Island. Where does that courage come from? Where did that bravery come from?
Well, I think two things. By the time I was swimming with sharks, I'd done a lot of healing with my dad. I have no idea if that's why I got in the water with sharks. But I do believe that there's a before and after dad effect. And I do believe that a lot of that shakiness started to get more solid when he came into my life. It was like male energy pouring into my core. For those of you who know anything about energy therapy, they'll tell us that our first chakra is our root chakra. It's like our tribe, it's everything. So mine was all probably, for those who deal with energy, was probably like, and yet after my dad came into my life and we healed, I did feel a sense of feeling stronger. I did feel a sense, his acceptance allowed me to feel more accepted in the world. And even though I didn't meet him until I was almost 18, which is why I believe it's never too late. But the courage was more a need. I don't know that I had no idea it was going to get as big and as difficult and as messy as it got, or maybe I wouldn't have done it. And that's the case with life, right? We don't always know what we're in for till we're on the other end of it, and then we look back and go, well, it's a good thing I did it, but if anyone told me, I probably wouldn't have. With my father, there was no saying no to this inner voice in me that said, you must find your father. It was like I needed to find the other half of me. And even when he was being a jerk, and even when he first wasn't doing what he should do, even after the DNA test, he wasn't sure what he was going to do, there was still a small inner voice in me that I learned to listen, that Arianna Huffington calls the GPS for your soul. And it's that inner voice that knows exactly where you need to do, knows exactly what the next turn is. And I didn't know that then. I know that now looking back, that I always had a sense that, don't worry, it's going to work out. And even as I was writing this book, the editor was like, well, you're going to have to explain that because people are going to throw this book across the room and say, why does she keep going back for more? And she's like, but if you're telling me it's because on an inner level you knew it was going to work out in some way, then write that. And so I detail those feelings that's what, it was an inner no say no. And we all have that, right? Some of you have dreams that you're not acting on or that you've acted on, but those can't say no things like, I just can't ignore this. I must do what I'm being driven to do. I was driven to find him, and then I was driven to keep following the path because part of me knew it was going to work out, and I didn't know how. And in my case, it worked out in a way where there was actual reconciliation and physical healing. I don't know that that happens in everybody's case. I know that forgiveness looks different for everyone. It may be that there's no reconciliation, but you got what you needed. You got to know that person that you needed to take that leap of faith to at least know where you come from. And it maybe doesn't turn out that you go have Thanksgiving together, but you let it go. You go through that process of forgiveness, which is a letting go of, not necessarily shaping and reconciling. And I'm happy I got the actual happy ending. But the forgiveness and the letting go of all the hurt and the pain is probably why I'm not as shaky now as I would have been when I was growing up.
So when I was reading the book, the entire time I kept thinking about your mom. And you talked a little bit about kind of what her experience was, right, through this whole journey and this feeling of not being included.
Yeah.
So at any point did you struggle with feeling as though you were betraying her by reaching out to him, and especially that summer that you moved in?
I didn't feel betraying her reaching out because I had her support. She encouraged me to go write a letter, and I even showed it to her. But I did feel a sense of betrayal when I thought about moving in with him, and especially because he was not kind. I mean, that first news conference, he came out. You'll read in there. I was shocked. I wanted to throw rocks at the TV because he came out and said, well, yes, I have a DNA test, but I have no legal responsibility. And he used the word to describe my mother, which was a complete lie. I called her a gold digger and said that he had no legal responsibility, but didn't say anything bad about me. I don't know if he got bad advice. I don't know if he was trying to, that's what you do, you go on the defense. And I got very defensive at that point. So then I got to have my news conference the next day. And I was very I was much more And my dad later commented, "That's not the same girl I met. She's been coached. She's been this." He's saying on TV, and I'm thinking, I wasn't coached. I'm mad. Okay. And I was, like, how could he do that? And my mom, of course, was, when those kind of news reports came on, the gold digger comment, it backfired. He ended up, people didn't, everyone, the majority of people thought, you have a daughter and you should be taking care of her. And, but even just being referred to in a newspaper article as an affair from the 70s, after my mom had worked so hard to raise a daughter alone, built up a business, become a professional, that was hurting her. And there were days where she was crying, and there were days where she was mad, and I'm thinking, am I losing a mother and gaining a father, especially when he did offer the acceptance? But then she would calm down and she'd, I'm sorry. You do what you want. I think that you probably need to do this, but I'm all done. I don't need him in my life, that kind of stuff. And ultimately, when it all settled down and he basically took responsibility, so, both of us won anyway because he ended up acknowledging that he should take care of me. And that's where I talk about, he did right some wrongs, and he took some egg on his face, and he had me move in with him, and nobody knew if that was just a PR stunt. Is he just going to have me move in for a couple weeks and then I'm going to be gone? But it wasn't, because he insisted that I not just lay on the beach. He wanted me to come to work with him every day so I could get to know him. He took me to every cabinet meeting and, events, and that made me feel accepted. He wasn't just hiding me in his house. He was showing me to the world. He was owning me. And my parents had a few conversations by telephone, which they started to have to deal with each other. Parents' Day weekend, they both showed up at the University of Michigan. That was a little odd. I was excited to have both my parents in the same room, at the same time terrified, like, how is this gonna work? We're all gonna go just see a football game together? It's only 6 months later. And so I was always worried about how my mom was feeling. But I also had to realize that we can't take on our parents' pain. And I was drowning in it for a while. I eventually had to let it go and be like, this is too heavy. I'm gonna sink. This is your pain. I'm gonna be your daughter. I love you, no matter what, but I also gotta do what I need to do for me. And I needed to kind of keep them separate. And it's not like they just fixed themselves in 2 days. It took time for my parents. It took time for my mom. And there were sometimes moments where she'd go right back there and be like, well, so you just, I see, you like him better than me, or that kind of tone, and she'd get a little insecure, and I'd have to reassure her, no, Mom, you're always my mom. So there was always that need to want to reassure my mom. But the gift she gave me of allowing me to take that journey and even encouraging it, despite how she felt on some days, was a huge gift. I know people have come up to me and said, they didn't find out about their fathers, and then they finally met him, and the mother had always told them that he hated them and whatever, and then they find out their father kept this book and that he'd send Christmas gifts, but the mother actually said it was from an uncle, not from, there'd been other stories where the moms had so much hate, which my mom could have had, that they went the other direction and made sure that their child would never know the father. And I have to say, I don't think that's fair. I just don't. You brought a child into the world, and often what they need is to know both halves of them.
What did you learn about yourself that you didn't know before meeting your dad?
I think I learned I was a lot stronger than I realized. That journey really made me realize that when push comes to shove, I had some emotional resilience. I learned that I was a lot like my father, as my mother had said. And my mom would say that. My mom was as emotional as the day is long. She could cry at a Hallmark pic, and she'd be like, why are you so calm, cool, and collected? You're wired like him. And, and that ability I write about in the book about, I had a hold button, that my model and my father's model came with a hold button. I think that's why he was able to walk away from a burning plane and somehow have the fortitude to get himself out of Nazi-occupied Europe and get himself back to safely one day, in 6 months hiding in the underground. He had a way of facing crises. And I, today as a journalist, with the dubious honor of being the first news anchor to report the Sandy Hook school shootings, simply because I was the anchor on the desk when it happened, as those emotions were flooding in 1993 with everything happening, or today as emotions are flooding in when I'm reporting something like Sandy Hook or 9/11, there is another channel that I can go to that allows me to come from a logical part of myself and maybe parse it out and delay the emotions or process them one at a time. And it's a skill that I've developed as a journalist, but it's also something I learned that maybe that might have been the gift from my father, at least for what I do today. My dad knew how to come from his logical side. He didn't know how to come from his heart, not till later. I think having a daughter allowed him to come from his heart. And so many years, that World War II generation and learning how to face death, he built walls around his heart. I kind of had both. I learned how to bridge it. And so I think going through that with my dad taught me that your heart and your mind are equally important, but they're important at different times and how to access them.
So I have a couple more questions, but I want to open it up. So does anybody have a question that they want to ask?
Yes, Laura.
Oh, sure. Sure, Antoinette.
Okay, I have a great question for you, Carol. Well, number one, how long you write this book? And second, how long you just read a book? And three, how you find out the beautiful story?
So how long did it take me to write the book? How long did it take me to read it?
Yes.
And then how does it feel? Is that what the third question is? So it took me, the best advice I ever got on how to write a book came from, well, there were many, there's lots of advice, but one of the best pieces of advice I got when I thought, how am I going to write a book? Especially when someone told me a memoir was going to be 70,000 words. I thought, do you know I write stories that are 2 minutes long for TV? And where will I start and how will I end? And I have no time. Don't you know I work full time and I've got 2 kids and a husband and all of that. It happened in stages, but Lila Kane, the wife of Dan Kane, former Channel 3 reporter, is a wonderful, lovely lady. And she said, when you write, you need to think of it like a pearl necklace. Just tell each story is a pearl, and you'll worry about how you string them on that necklace later. Just tell the stories, you'll string it later. And so I started with going to the Mark Twain writing class because Mika Brzezinski, who's quoted on the front cover of the book, was like, you got to write this book. So that was the first thing. I had a good friend who'd actually written a couple books who said, you need to write this story and it's going to mean something to people. So that gave me a little sense, but I still didn't know how to write it. So I took the Mark Twain writing class, and those are wonderful. They have them several times a year, so go to their website. And they actually, as meant to be, moments happen. Diane Smith also said, you need to take this Mark Twain writing class. And I thought, okay, someday, and I'll call. And then literally like the next day, I get there and the emails in my mailbox about the memoir writing class. It was starting like the week after. Wow. At Wednesday, 5:30 to 7:30, the end of my street. Like I had no excuse. I could take the class. It was easy. There's the thing. Press here to register. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm clearly meant to do this, so let me do that. And I started with there, and then I learned about how to write a book proposal, which if you want to have your book published by a publisher, which I did, I had to learn that process. It's like a business plan for your book. And there are many programs online. I used Your Big, Beautiful Book Proposal. You can Google that. It's by Diane Laporte. Another friend of mine who writes best-selling books told me that's what she used. So I did that, and I plugged it all in. And so that was the process of gathering my thoughts. And I wrote 2 really good chapters in the book proposal, and then I ended up signing a publishing contract. And they gave me 6 months to give them the rest of my book.
Wow.
So I'd done a lot of writing, I'd done a lot of outlining, I had a good foundation, but the real writing happened, again, it's not like all of a sudden I could leave my job and whatever. I wrote almost every night, without fail, from 9 to 10, after my kids would go to bed. So it was really an hour a day. That's doable. I think you just have to be disciplined about your writer. You have to promise yourself you're gonna at least write 500 words a day. And maybe you sit down and you're gonna end up writing 2,000 because it flows really easily. But if you make a commitment like you do with going to the gym or like you do with any other thing you wanna change in your life, you have to be disciplined about it. So I didn't have a lot of time. That made it easy. I'm like, well, if I'm gonna write, it's gonna have to happen before I go to bed. I'd write from 9 to 10 on almost every night. Sometimes there were big deadlines and I'd have to take a little longer, and it might be a weekend where I'd have to bribe Dennis and be like, hey, you want to take the kids out for a few hours? And then I'd go really buckle down. But it wasn't like I just left life to go write a book, and most people don't nowadays.
Wow, thank you. Sir, did you have it right there? Yeah.
You talked about your mom a bit, and I was kind of interested, like, how did that first conversation go where you came back and said, he wants me to move in with him?
Well, it happened on TV that he said this, so she knew. Then he was like, hey, guess what? And he was like, everything that happened on TV. Like, the TV's a messenger in my life, right? I found my dad on TV. He asked me to come live with him on TV. I work on TV. I mean, it's just the TV is like, that's, everyone has themes in their life. Mine's TV. So my mom knew, and she was okay with it. She thought, I think she was very happy on one sense, like this, thank God, this is over, and it's ending in a happy way. And I think she felt, in some ways, just rectified a little bit that at least he was doing what he should do. That he wasn't attacking her or saying he wasn't responsible. He was finally taking responsibility, which is something she thought he should have done 18 years before. I think she just thought, okay, she's gonna go for like a month and we'll see what happens. It happens again in stages. I was going to go to college anyway in the end of August. So what happened for her is that she became an empty nester sooner. And there was, on one sense, she would have described like, wow, I've done all this hard work and I've always wanted to be able to really focus on some things that she wanted to work on in her own life, and now she could. Like, all of a sudden, she didn't have to worry about providing for college because he was going to do that. She didn't have to worry about taking care of all the things of daily things about mom because I was going to go off to college, and now I'm really going. But at the same time, as much as the burden was lifted off of her, there was a feeling of, it was, I think, an unsettled feeling for her. And she felt lonely, and I called her a lot, and I felt bad, and she didn't dump it on me about leaving. I think she was okay about that. I mean, by that point I was a teenager, so she was also used to not having to do every little thing for me. But, I remember the first time he asked me to come to the Thanksgiving, and that was a big deal, to be like, Mom, he wants me to come to Thanksgiving, and I think I want to go, but I promise I'm coming with you for Christmas. And, she was okay, but I think she wanted me to come to Thanksgiving with her, but she also knew that it was important that I go with him. So it was like that. She'd be like, you know what, you should do this, I'm happy for you. And then at times I knew that even though she's saying that, she didn't always feel that inside. And as you'll read in the book, it would come out maybe in angry moments, like when she's moving me into college and we're slugging our backs up to the dorm room. And I'm like, she wants to pay some guys to help. And I'm like, no, we can do it ourselves. Look, we can do it. And she'd be like, really? Where's your father? If he's so great, why isn't he here? And I'm thinking, I'm like, well, Daddy, Mom, he's 72 years old and he's governor. He can't come move me. And she, it was like that. Mom was I say in the book, she was my everyday dishes. We could fight and I knew she'd still love me when it was over. And Dad was fine china and I didn't know how to fight with him and I didn't even know what I was going to call him. And so it was unfair that sometimes I didn't treat her as well as I treated him because he was still almost like a stranger. So I had to get to know him. So I think sometimes she felt there was a double standard, and she wouldn't have been wrong. It's just that, I'd grown up with her, and that evened out over time. My dad and I did learn to fight. It's just, in the beginning, it probably looked like I had him on a pedestal. Yeah.
Is there a question on this side? Yes.
You spoke a lot about your feelings about families without fathers, and you're doing your part by getting your message out. But how do you think we can impact society to get that message out? I mean, it's not your responsibility.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons I wrote a book about it, because I thought fatherlessness is a big issue. I think it's one of the reasons it was published, because it's an issue that's affecting so many people. I write more about how it feels and how it affects. And I think what I'm hearing from people when they write, when people experience something, that's when you get change, right? And so I hope, in my small part, that people read this story, they identify with how it makes you feel to grow up fatherless. Maybe dads will think about it. I've certainly gotten some letters in that respect that they want to reconnect. How do they do that? I'm not the best person to advise them how, because I don't know always the situation. But I think when you heal it for one, you heal it for many. So when I wrote the story, it was really healing for myself. And other people read it, and it's affecting them in different ways. Maybe they want to seek out their father. I think the message that it's never too late to heal is a powerful one. I caution and say that I know some fathers were very damaging to their children, and maybe the answer isn't to bring them back into your life, but it's to let it go and to do the healing exercise in that. I think in reading Finding Dad, if you walk away with anything, it's that dads are important. And that even if you are a father who's walked away, it's not too late to walk back in. And that if you're a kid growing up without a father, maybe you recognize some of the feelings and you learn how to heal it for yourself. Or maybe it means in some way you're taking a leap to reconcile. When I go out and do national news shows like CBS This Morning or when Morning Joe and those kinds of things, it's been a privilege for me to raise awareness and to put a different face to fatherlessness. Because people will say, well, you don't look like that. We don't think of, but when you see someone like me out there and go, oh, well, okay, and affected, and you never know how that's changing people. But I think in any issue, the more we talk about it, write books, go on TV, it raises awareness that it's a real thing. I learned from research in this book, science never even studied the effect that a father has on a child until recently. In the 70s and the 80s, all psychological research, every funded study was only on how mothers affect children. I don't know why it sounds so silly, but now there's a great Yale researcher, which I did a story, you could probably find it on my YouTube page or on my website. You can go to Sundlun.com, I think it's up there. And I talk about the many faces of fatherlessness and also the science of forgiveness. And I interviewed a Yale clinical psychologist, and he said that the good thing is the human brain has no limit on the capacity to experience positive things and to rewire itself. But negativity, negative thoughts and holding in and all of that, it can actually depress, one negative thought for 5 minutes can depress your immune system for 8 hours, which is a scientific reason to forgive, to let it go. But what he found is that exactly what I'm talking about, the need to feel solid, all that is that's where the father comes. And actually, there's studying now that fathers actually have an effect on your DNA. Like on a cellular level, your cells can change by having the presence of a father in your life. And the biggest indicator of a child's vocabulary, I would have thought mother, it's the father. And he also found the number one indicator of a father in someone's life is often the relationship that father has with the mother. And that is another issue that we don't talk about so often, is moms often think we can do it all on our own. And society tells us we should do it all on our own. And that's something that Dr. Steve Perry talked about. We have to quit putting on TV shows that dads have no clue how to parent. We would never say mom is babysitting tonight, but we'll say, oh, dad, who's got the kids? Oh, dad's babysitting. We need to kind of, as a society, quit saying that dads are an accessory, that they really are needed. And we don't often, as a society, even show that. Dads often, my father, I know, felt like he said sometimes, well, you're probably better off that you grew up without me, the tough guy or that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, of course not, but there was a part of him that believed that, maybe it's better that I wasn't around. I was hard on, I was and even had he been around in any capacity, no doubt it would change the makeup of me. I mean, it all worked out, so it's okay. But I think sometimes dads do think they can't go back or they're not necessary. And we need to have that discussion too. So raising awareness. I mean, a book is one small thing, but talking about it raises awareness.
Is there another question on the side of the room? No? Okay, yes.
Well, my wheels are turning as you're talking here. I think you said a great quote when you said bring in awareness and put in a face. You're not the typical face, for a child, our fathers. But I was curious, how many book discussions do you do throughout, I don't know, just in Connecticut? And I ask that because I work in child protection. And I see, and with that, we started a group at our office engaging fathers. Because like you said,
tell you is I am speaking around, and you can go on my website, carasundlun.com. There's actually a form for a speaking request, and I'm going. So if you have an idea in that respect, but basically, I've been going. I did some stories for Channel 3. I've been blogging on HuffPost. I had a blog recently published in the Washington Post on Post Everything. I've been going, fortunately it's taken off and that there's been an interest. So I was speaking about the issue of fatherless on Fox News and on CBS This Morning. So as far as how I get my message out, I think it's you keep talking about it. But how you get, I guess more importantly, how you get your message out is you can use examples like this.
You're
and
the face and connect,
yeah.
You are that face that people can relate to. And I think that's so important for any generation to know and to see, and so yes, I can go on the forum piece, but I was very curious, like how often do you do these discussions,
The book came out November 11th, so it's kind of like I've just started, and I've been doing, I started at the Mark Twain House, and I've done some local book signings at different places, and it always leads to Q&A like this. So even though it's not always with a wonderful moderator like Thea, sometimes it's just by myself. But people, I had a woman come to me who was adopted, and they all have Q&A in the crowd, and she had spent her whole life searching for her father, and she did meet half siblings, but she'd heard he wasn't open to meeting her, and she really wishes she would have done it sooner, because the night before she came to the book signing, someone had mailed her his obituary, so she lost that chance, and she was 50. But here's someone she's 50 years old, a grown woman, successful, had a career, had her own family, but it still carries with her that she needed to know. And so I hope with Finding Dad, when I talk about that it's never too late to heal, and I also talk about honoring that thing that you need to know, that, that's a message that's real. I think if in your situation, if you tell a dad, well, I messed up and I just got a letter from prison, and the father's, my heart broke, because here he wants to be a good father, but his daughter won't visit him in prison, and he had a bunch of horrible life circumstances. One thing led to another. But all he's worried about is how is this going to impact his daughter, that he's not in her life and he's in prison. And I don't have the answer. I'm not a psychologist to say exactly how, but I was taken aback by that he realizes that he loves his daughter. And I'm like, part of me just wants to say, like, even whoever you are, I know that some will say, your father was a governor. Well, that's easy. Look at him. But I think if my father had been a school teacher or a criminal or something, I still would have needed to know who he was. And so the fact that he showed up and then did nothing else but sometimes still keep screwing up and whatever, but he was there and he started to love me. All a dad needs to do, all moms have to do, really. We all try to think we have to take them to 8 million dance practices and do whatever. What your parents really need to do, it's not about what their life is, it's about just loving their kids. So if there was one message to the father, I would say, just show them that you love them. You don't have to be perfect. I have a friend of mine who has a different situation where her father was not really in her life. She was raised by someone else. Her mother was successful. Her father was someone who went in and out of prison. And now she's very successful. She works for Saturday Night Live. And she said, you know what? Every time I do see my dad, it's not the community that I feel comfortable in. And I go there and I think, oh gosh, whatever. But she goes, it's still important that I know who he is. And I still see, she goes, I'm in the business of comedy. She was like, my dad, despite all of his wrongs, like anytime they go to dinner, she's got to pay. He's kind of one of those guys. He's never got, and he's not exactly, the opposite of what I experienced with my father. But she's like, he's funny. And she goes, I think, I love comedy and I'm funny because of him. So she still got recognition, even though her dad is someone who's in and out of jail, and she's not the most proud of him. If you read the memoir, The Glass Castle, which I felt in some ways was like my story, where Jeanette Walls is a journalist, and both of her parents, he's mentally ill, her mom's a squatter. I mean, literally, she's a New York Times best-selling author, and occasionally she has to walk by a dumpster and see her parents. And they don't want her to help them. And she grew up in a crazy environment where the dad was always talking about building a glass castle, and she hoped and believed that for a long time. But that, as she grew older, realized my parents are not altogether there. But she got gifts from them. I don't think it matters what you do. I think it matters that you are a human being and you have something to offer to your child, even if you're not perfect. children have a way of seeing the best in their kids. I mean, I saw the best in my father, despite the fact that he had a lot of wrongs. I just saw him as, and to this day, I probably sugarcoat a lot of the wrongs he made. I was willing to forgive them because I saw the good in him. And that wasn't hard for me. I think as children, we're kind of primed to have unconditional love, so you can see the good in your parents. And I would say that to your program. Like, encourage the dads to know that if there's anyone in their life who could see the good in them, or who at least wants to see the good in them, it's their kids.
So, with regard to the book itself,
Yeah.
Did your father, what was his reaction to, airing the family's dirty laundry, per se? Was he open to your writing this book? Did he ask you to censor anything, or?
Well, he passed before I finished it, but I feel like he was helping me write it all the way. When I was writing 9 to 10 at night, I felt like my father was there helping me, and you'll see that at the end when it's talking about helping him cross over, and that I still felt like he was guiding me. The other project has been helping produce this film on the World War II Foundation on his escape from Nazi Europe, which is called Above and Beyond. And on another note, I'm doing a book talk and signing with the Jewish Film Festival, because that film is premiering in Connecticut, and I narrate it, and I actually went and retraced his steps. It's where I understood why he became the tough guy that he became. And I say that to answer your question because I understood his wrongs because I got to walk in his footsteps a little bit, and that taught me the lesson of compassion. So that's a whole other thing that I've been doing to honor his legacy. He knew that someday I might write a book, and there were a zillion newspaper articles written about it. My dad was very forthcoming. So he used to just say to me, regarding our story and regarding anything I did in life, give them the facts, don't sugarcoat it. And I struggled with that when I decided to write the book. It was one of the reasons it took me so long, because people kept saying for years I should write a book. And I thought, well, how am I going to write a book without telling the hard stuff? And I don't want to disrespect my father and that kind of stuff. And then ultimately when I wrote it afterward, I thought, well, I went round and round with the editor, with friends, and they're like, but you know what? As you read Finding Dad, you're going to see an unmistakable love that I had for my dad, and a wonderful happy ending and healing. But I had to tell the hard stuff. And my dad that gave me the freedom to do that, I guess, because he was always the one who said, give them the facts, don't sugarcoat it. And I had to do that with our own story. And he was always very forthcoming about our story. When we were out campaigning, and it was tough for him. Sometimes in the beginning, when the story broke, there was some reporters who framed him underneath a deadbeat dad billboard and were like, are you a deadbeat dad? That kind of stuff. And so he took flack for his decisions. But we would heal with humor, and that's a wonderful thing that people have. Humor is one of the best things that human beings have to get through tough times. I can remember being on a beach in Narragansett, and he's out there shaking hands campaigning, and a woman wants him to kiss her baby, and he obliged, and then throws his arm around me, and he's like, have you met my new baby? And the woman just laughed, and of course she'd seen it on the news, and he laughed. And my family has just ultimately, you'll see a picture in the book where at my wedding, my mother's kissing him, his ex-wife, and then his latest wife. So there's 3 of them all planting a kiss, and he's like, And this, we've had Thanksgiving with all those people there, with my brother's mother, my mother, his current wife. And even when he passed away in a hospital, it was me, his wife, now widow, and his ex-wife taking care of him, taking shifts at the hospital. And laughing with the nurses that were kind of happily dysfunctional. And, it's just one of those things. My father was married 5 times, and he'd be like, oh my God, don't say that. People think I'm crazy. I sound crazy. And it does sound crazy. And so many of our stories in our own life sound crazy. So I did hesitate to put it down on paper. But I think when you tell your story and you become a little less perfect, which is something that often people think of us on TV. I host a show about making life better, and there is that, do people want to hear our dirty laundry? But all I've gotten was thank you for sharing and thank you for being real, because nobody has a perfect life. So if you tell people how you get through the tough times, I think all of us can feel a little bit more relaxed, like you and I did at dinner, being oh my God, let's say, oh wow, well that's great. Nobody has to put on airs, because we all feel like we have to go into someplace and someone's going to find out that our life isn't perfect. And the real truth is nobody's life is perfect.
Yeah.
So I think that writing that was difficult at first, and then the more I got support that people really don't want to hear perfect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, and I think about dinner and, you know, you're sharing your experience and it gave me permission, it felt like emotionally, to talk about, you know, my own dysfunctional family, who I love very much, but they're still dysfunctional. Can I question here?
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you for writing the book, and it's a nice title. Your mom, she wasn't married when she had you, and then you turn around and now you have your family. Did that have did you purposely get married and have children and stuff like that?
Yes.
And that was,
Yes, I think that I feel like my mom, I say like the best birth control ever was like my mom being a single mom and me thinking I don't want to do it like her. I mean, God bless her. She did great things, but it was hard. You know, she was balancing 8 million hats at all times. And I always thought when I have a family, I want to do it the way Brooke and Dana's family did it. I want a dad, and I want like kids, and I want to have the family. And I talk about that it's never too late to heal, and that the whole reason I think I got the family that I so wished for and dreamed of as a child is because we healed. Because I'm not so sure that I ended up with a rock solid guy like Dennis if I hadn't gone through some healing with my father. Because I did tend to date the bad boys, or as you know, psych books will say that fatherless kids, especially women, we tend to recreate the feeling of abandonment. And that's why fatherlessness is passed down generation after generation, because we go back and date a guy that was, and he doesn't have a role model because his dad wasn't, I mean, we recreate what we felt comfortable with. And I do notice that after my dad showed up in my life, not consciously, but I just started to, like, it took time, but all of a sudden I started to date better guys. They started to come from like more nuclear families. And maybe because he showed up, he accepted me, my self-worth improved. I had different standards of how I wanted to be treated, that I felt maybe more entitled to be treated in different ways, because, you know, books will tell you that the first person a little girl dates is her father. Her father shows how she should be treated. So even if the father's not having a good relationship with the mother, even if things are sour there, which we all know that relationships don't always work out, but the way the father treats his daughter is what she's going to look for in men. And I still say it's never too late to heal, because I saw a huge difference. And, you know, my father and Dennis really became close. And I can remember when Dennis first met my father, I didn't introduce him for a long time because I thought, well, I'm not going to, I was like nervous to bring Dennis to my dad, and I just thought, well, who knows. But Dennis sensed that it was important he meet my father if we were ever going to get any farther. So one time I said I was having dinner at a certain restaurant, he just showed up. And he went right to the table, and you'll see this in the book, and I'm like, oh my God, why is Dennis here? And it was me, a girlfriend, and my dad. And she's like, I think that's Dennis over there. I'm like, oh my God. And he starts walking in, and we're in Newport, and he walks right up to my dad. I don't even think he said hi to me. And he's like, Governor, Dennis House. Dad goes, you're the anchor man. And Dennis goes, among other things. And my father said, it's the other things I'm worried about. And then they laughed, and like that was like, but it was just like, some kids might have found that kind of dad being nosy or protective, intrusive or invasive, and because I hadn't grown up with it, I liked it when my dad, you know, kind of would skewer a guy that I brought home or something, because I felt that protection that I was probably seeking. So the answer to your question, yes, I think that having my own family is a huge part of my own healing. Like, I get to relive it, and my dad got to do things for my kids that he never did for me because it wasn't there. Like showing up at my daughter's first birthday party, or giving my son a bottle, or like, that all heals you too, because life always gives you an opportunity for second chances. It's never over.
Do you remember the show Murphy Brown?
Yeah.
Her thing was, you don't need a man to raise. I mean, that was the theme.
Yeah.
And feminism and stuff like that. And it seems like there's been a decade of me meeting women like that, you know, that have that philosophy, or that live that. And now here you are coming from a different angle, very inclusive with fathers and with families.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. I only read the first chapter.
Yeah.
You know, I started it today, and
I'm all about dads being inclusive. Someone else should help change diapers, for sure. No, I mean, I remember my dad looking at Dennis. He sent in, like, they had, like, old school, like, to write notes. So after spending a weekend with us when we came down to visit in Newport in the summer, and it was in the middle of, like, craziness with toddler dome and diapers, everything, 2 kids and nuttiness. And my dad, like, wrote down, I've never seen such a good mother and a father, you know, or whatever. Like, he thought it was, like, he called it being a mother because, like, he's, like, you know, and, like, I talk about the first time my dad gave Julian, my son, a bottle. Like, he'd never given a baby a bottle. I'm like, how did you raise 3 kids and never give a bottle? And he looked so awkward, but, like, he wanted to do it. He was just like, "Ugh," you know, or the first time he held my daughter in the hospital, he was, like, scared that he was going to break her, you know? And he was the kind of dad who, like, went out and made money and showed up occasionally. And there was a mom and a nanny, and, like, you know, it was a whole different generation. But he wanted to do it and learn how to do it later. And, like, he loved watching Dennis be hands-on. And so I think yes, women can do a lot, but we shouldn't have to. I do think we should have dads in the equation. And even if that means if the father's not going to be, maybe not everyone's going to stay married forever and all that. I know that there's a lot of divorce, but I do think dads belong in the picture because the kids need that.
Pramod, how are we doing on time? Are we okay for a couple more questions? 2 more questions. Okay, sir. Yes, in the red.
You said, what school did you eventually go to, and was your mom and dad involved?
Yes, I went to University of Michigan, and because actually by the time I knew and met my father, by the time my father had agreed to accept me and all that, I'd already been accepted to college. And I had chosen University of Michigan in part because it was a great school, but it was also in-state tuition. So I had made that decision already, not knowing what was going to happen. And I thought actually at the time, maybe I'll go to University of Michigan and maybe I'll transfer out east to be closer to him, because I did feel like I've got a lot of catching up to do and I can't just see him twice a year. But I ended up staying at University of Michigan. I loved it, but that was good for my mom because she was only 45 minutes away, so I could see her more frequently. But my father did come out for Parents' Day weekend. Holidays, I would go with him, and that side of the family, he would a lot of times take the whole family on a vacation after Christmas. So I would spend Christmas with my mom and then go on vacation with my dad and my brothers. So we had these family memories, and I would go and spend summers with my dad. After I met him every summer that I wasn't working, once I started working, it was a little harder. But I would go and live with him in Newport and work there, you know, be a waitress or do internships or that kind of stuff. And ultimately, when I had a full-time job and graduated college, I definitely felt a dad clock ticking. I was like, I need to it's why I'm here in Hartford. I wanted to get closer to Rhode Island because I was worried that my first job was in Virginia, then I was in Michigan, and then I was applying out east. And you'll see in the book, I got a job offer to go to Pittsburgh that was full-time at a bigger market, and a job offer to go part-time in Hartford. Now, ultimately, I wanted to end up in New York or Boston in those days. I thought, well, I'm going to New York, Boston anyway, so it's not my last step. But I picked Hartford because it was driving distance to Rhode Island. And it was still a big enough market that I could advance my career. It was less money, it was part-time, but that was the dad clock. That was me going, I need to be able to see him more because I can't just, you know, you're working full-time, you can't be on vacation, and, you know, you can't fly home every weekend, that's too expensive. So that was one of the reasons. And I didn't know that I'd end up meeting Dennis here and that would also keep me rooted here. But it's one of the reasons that I am here is because I got a job offer in Hartford that was within driving distance of Rhode Island where he lived.
Last question right here.
Yes, I was going to ask, but it sounded like you spent more time away at college, but when you actually did move into the governor's mansion, were there any jealousy among the older siblings because now you were living in?
Well, it's interesting. My older siblings are my 3 half-brothers that are actually old enough to be my father, so they were not living there. My brothers are 20-some years older than me, because my father was, again, he was a World War II generation guy. He's a little older for having me. I was the second batch, because my father was 55 when I was born. So my brothers now are 62, 61, and turning 60. So no one was living at home, but they were very open to me. I have a whole chapter called The 3 Brothers. The way it worked is they each came each weekend. There were 2 stepchildren, and my stepbrother, my father was married to a woman named Marjorie. She was First Lady at the time. Marjorie, again, thank God for Marjorie. She was very open, because, the wife could make things difficult. And she was very open to having me come. She had known about me, I guess. She said, she's like, I always told him if you ever come looking for him, he should open his heart. So Marjorie was wonderful. She could have made it difficult. Her daughter, Kim, you'll see a scene that was a difficult scene in there, my very first family dinner. Kim didn't just cry, she wailed at the dinner table, like compulsively crying. I had no idea what to say or expect. I'm just going to think about which fork to use. I mean, we're at this family dinner. It's in this formal dining room, and there's a server asking if you want vegetables, and she's just bawling. And I'm like, oh my God. And I start to realize she's crying because of me. And then she ultimately had to leave the table. And her husband took her home. She wasn't living in the house, she lived nearby. And her brother apologized, and they're like, just give Kim a little moment. It was ironic to me that she wasn't even blood, but my father had been a father figure to her. While he was vacant in my life, she didn't have a good relationship with her biological father, but my father had been her father figure. So she felt like she was being replaced, especially because I was the quote-unquote real daughter. And that was, I think, a difficult time. But she ultimately, we're not close, but we're not on bad terms. She went on with her own life. My father and Marjorie ended up getting divorced, and he married again. So this is the thing, he's been married 5 times. So there are stepchildren along the way. So Kim and I are fine, and she has wonderful children and all that, but she eventually got over it, and we didn't really talk that much about that night. But it was a realization of, oh my God, it's not just my dad and me. It's not just us. There's a whole other family here who has to deal with the fact that I exist now. Thankfully, most of them were very accepting.
Yeah. So my last question, has to do with what's next. So with writing this book, did you feel as though there was closure around this issue with, your dad, or, is there more to this story?
I think that I had long ago felt that there was closure. I think what I felt when writing the book was that there was healing, and I really got to figure it out and put into words what really happened with us and make it more concrete. And what the next step is, what I say, the reason I wrote it is that I hope that my story can inspire others to take a journey of healing and to think about fatherlessness. So what I like about Finding Dad is that I can come to groups like this and continue to speak, and the book is doing well, so I feel that that's good. It's hitting a chord, and people are commenting on my Facebook and Twitter pages, and so I hope that it leads to a forum. I think that you don't often know when you do something like this how it's going to take off, and I still don't know. But my hope is that on some level, it affects change. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and raising the issue around fatherlessness in America.
It's a hard word for me too.
Totally, right?
It's a lot of syllables
It's a
in
mouthful.
fatherlessness.
For sure. And thank you also for being such a great friend to the library as well. And thank all of you for joining this conversation tonight. Kara will be signing books, I believe.
Yes.
So if you don't have the book, we're selling them in the back there. Thank you. Have a great night.